behalf of the members of the New Jersey Legislative Bloc Caucus, from Trenton to you, I'm your host, New Jersey State Senator Ronald Rice, and Chairman of the New Jersey Legislative Bloc Caucus. Joining me in the studio today is Bishop Jethro James, Chairman of the Newark, North Jersey Committee of Black Churchmen, and my good friend and schoolmate, James Harris, President of the New Jersey State Conference of NJNAACP. Welcome, guys. How are you today?
Great, Senator. Good to be here.
It's good to have you on the program. And there's a lot of things been happening in New Jersey over the last couple of years as it relates to civil rights and programs that are being cut by the government at the state level as well as the federal level. I know that President Obama is under fire right now, but so is Chris Christie, the governor of the state of New Jersey, and those of us in the legislature. And so today we're going to talk about some of the issues that mostly impact your lives individually, as well as your family members. Also, we're going to be talking, which is most important for our viewers here in the studio today, about issues impacting the state of New Jersey and the lives of people in our state from the business perspective as well as the community in general. But before we do that, we always like to have our guests kind of tell our viewers something about themselves so people can kind of meet you on a personal basis and so they can have kind of an informal view of what we are doing here in terms of conversation. So why don't we start with you, Bishop? You know, Bishop James, you know, you and I have a long-standing relationship.
Yes, sir.
And that relationship goes all the way back to our employment at PSE&G, where we both worked. You probably did a better job than me and made more money, but that's okay. But I know that over the years you've always been community-minded. You've always tried to help people in your personal capacity as a citizen, as well as with the company at PSE&G. But the good Lord called you into the ministry, and I just think that's a wonderful thing, watching your growth spiritually. And I know that you've become a bishop. Yes. I know recently you just got appointed to a statewide position with the Baptist Conference. But we're going to talk about that. But why don't you tell our viewers something about, you know, Jethro James, the person, prior to entering the ministry. And then maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your experience as a minister and how coming into the ministry and ministering to your congregation and to the community in general, the kind of impact it has had on your life and your family life as well.
Well, Senator, born in Paterson, New Jersey in 1950 to working parents. My father at that time was working in a foundry. My mother cleaned people's houses. My father had a 6th grade education. My mom a 10th grade education. And then they're trying to make it being the first of 7 children, and they raised 9. They sort of dropped me off at my grandmother's in a little place called Powhatan, Virginia. And for the first few years of my life, as well as up till about the 7th grade, I was between the North and the South, so I know about segregation and whatnot. No one told us that we were po. We weren't poor, we were po. Only could afford P.O., couldn't afford the other O.R. And my mom used to take me to the Salvation Army and buy my clothes, and I would cry because I had become, you know, rather large, and she would say, only rich people can give clothes to the Salvation Army. And so I shined shoes on the street, paper route, used to love a snowstorm, that was work for me. Got a job as a teenager rolling bagels. Used to roll 3,600 bagels every Saturday for $10, which was a lot of money.
Bagels?
Bagels. And worked for Bay Cohen from there because, and one of the things that I want to say to young people, if you have a work ethic, you'll always stay out of trouble. Did well in school, and the incentive was this. Since my father only went to the 6th grade, he would say to me, son, I couldn't go to school. You will go to school, or I will get your hot pots. That's an incentive to achieve. And so I graduated high school, top of my class, went on to Burton Community College, and then Rutgers, as you know, was able to become employed at PSE&G, came up through the ranks, ran the unions, and that was my first real job dealing in the social, economic, political arena. And having the parents that I had and coming from the kind of family that I came from, sort of was a natural fit. Worked in with the Patterson Salvation Army, was on their board, and became certified with the state as a social worker. PSE&G, as you know, needed an outreach group, and here I am, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Still hold my state certification in social work.
So technically interacting with the community and really dealing with the social issues that are germane to everyday living and to people as we address the quality of life has always been a part of your life.
Yes, sir.
Well, the scripture always say that we need to feed the hungry and clothe those who are naked and provide water, et cetera, et cetera. And I know you are very much aware of the scripture. And maybe that's why God touched you and brought you into the ministry. Tell us something about the ministry, your church. Your wife is also a pastor, a reverend. Is that correct?
She's an executive minister. There's only one pastor.
Okay, well, okay, executive minister, but she had the same calling. She's been touched.
Yes,
and
yes.
she has a great voice.
Oh, yes.
And she can preach.
Yes, she can.
Okay, so we'll call her a preacher then, since she's an executive minister, but she's definitely a preacher. But I know that you raised a family, and I know that you've done well, but what has this transition to the ministry meant for your family in general?
Well, it sort of, it was almost, I was sort of the bad boy. I couldn't wait to get away from home. You do the things that young folks do. Still ride motorcycles, by the way. But my call came after a motorcycle accident that almost took my life. And I remember my mom, God rest her soul, coming up from Virginia and saying, "You're not living the way we raised you. You need to be back in church." And it's important to have that foundation and family. And so thus my calling, working every day, called to a little church in the neck of Newark that had to build a church with really $100,000 seed money, 40 members, and doing what I did at PSE&G, it was natural a natural fit to sort of bring some of the programs that was in corporate into the church community. As you know, successfully in a building project, membership went from 40 to a little over 500 now, and we thank God for the growth. Understanding the importance of community and where we're located on 15th Avenue and 100th Street. And so we have Girl Scouting in Newark. We have Girl Scouting, we have educational tutorial programs, we have a senior outreach ministry, we have a feeding program, we have music workshops, we have a youth department. There's almost anything you can want, you can get. We have references for drug and alcohol referrals, and then we do a lot of work with some of the local gangs, those returning, and those that are incarcerated. So we sort of have the rounded ministry, and everybody's not a member of the church. We even have what I call the real youth ministry, and that's where we buy ices. If it's a hot day, every kid that shows up, we just buy barrels of icy and give it to them. And I found out that these kids, they may grow up to be something less desirable than the church, but they never forget you. And so it's a natural. We have a coat giveaway. As a matter of fact, we're having a coat drive in the month of November, where we have good, clean coats, some of them new, and we just give them to people. And so we actually have a program that's just for the community. Now, my wife, this was real interesting because, believe it or not, I used to work for her. She was in Mama, I Want to Sing, Mama 2, and I used to have to sometimes go to the theater, take her to the theater in New York, and I'd actually act as an usher, which was real interesting. If an usher didn't show up, they just threw me in. But she was called to the ministry. She's a graduate of Howard University. She went on to get her master's at New York Theological Seminary, and she went on to get her doctorate out in Dayton, Ohio. Believe it or not, she is a professor at New York Theological Seminary to this day, as well as a life skills trainer with Passaic County. So she too is a social worker. I have a daughter, my oldest daughter, who said she would never do social work. Just happens to be a supervisor for DIFAS. And I have another daughter who is lives in Atlanta, her and her husband and my grandson. She's in the medical field, works for a doctor's group. Then I have a son who coaches kids and goes around the countries with kids, and that's what he loves to do. He's coached some notable NBA players. Tim Thomas is one of them, the young man that catches for the Jets. And so all my kids are into social work. They're grown. Thank God they're out of college, and I'm doing grandkids now.
Well, you know, social work to me has always been a ministry of its own. You know, if you read the scripture. We're going to ask you one more question on the personal side, and then we're going to go over to James Harris, president of the state NJNAACP conference. But the Newark, North Jersey Committee of Black Churchmen is really a long-standing organization that's been very, very helpful to the Essex County, North Jersey area, but particularly the city of Newark. And I recall going back many years ago when I first went to the city council in 1982, that the president of that organization was a very, very fine, well-respected man and pastor, and that was Reverend Edward Vernon. And Dr. Vernon, you know, since has passed on, and ultimately you became president of the organization. How did that come about?
Well, doing what I did at public service, Dr. Verner, as you said, was quite an influential man. Dr. Verner would call PSENG and say, I need that young man to go with me today, whether it was a meeting at the Star Ledger or a meeting with some legislator, and they would say, Jethro, you're in the field today because your job is to find out what's going on in the community. And so I always tell young preachers that I was sort of the briefcase carrier, but the briefcase carrier was always in the meeting next to the principals. Dr. Verner, Dr. Saboti,
yes.
Oh, and gosh, so many others. Dr. Nixon, who's still around, by the way.
Yes.
The late Dr. Willie Simmons, and I could go on and on and on, were the principals in the Newark area. And so I was sort of always at the table, but more so as a briefcase carrier. And I learned, always being respectful. And so as these gentlemen started to age, Dr. Verner came to me and said, we've had a meeting. I wasn't included in that meeting, and he said, we've decided who should succeed me. I said, sir, I have a job at PSENG and I can't do it. And he said, there's no such thing as can't, and we've already decided. And I gave him several other names, and if you knew Dr. Verner,
that's right.
When he didn't like something, he just said, pfft, and he did one of those pfft at me, and I realized that I had no choice. And thank God, while he and Dr. Simmons and so many others were living, that they chose me as their successor, and they blessed that election. And I've been, I guess, it ever since. I've tried to hold several elections, and the executive committee said, well, do we really need to go through this, or until we decide we want to change, right, you're it. And I thank God for the opportunity, and I thank God for the insight that Dr. Verner and so many others who have gone on now, and the belief that they had in my character, that I would succeed, that I should succeed them and do the best I can. So I really believe Scripture says that we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and so I have to do my best for our people.
Well, you know, in the city of Newark, you know, it's interesting because I recall the time when, as you say, Dr. Perry Simmons and Dr. Vernon and others would meet every Wednesday at St. James Baptist Church, AME Church rather, Reverend Watley and all of them, were commissioners, and I participated quite a few times. And the structure, they used to have over 250 members of clergy members represented at breakfast. And at the time, the organization had committees, which I thought was very important and very necessary, that I think really need to come back today, regardless of how we bring them back. There was a committee that dealt with nothing but education. And we're going to get to education when we start talking about local control and takeover in a moment. But those committees were very important to our movement to get local control back. There were committees to deal with things such as health care. The merger of UMD&J and Rutgers conversation would have been null and void with the committee structure we had. So it's something we need to talk about pulling back together, because I know since then many of the leadership in the pastoral community in our ministry that we depended on so much have since passed on. There are a lot of new clergy members throughout the state now, but in Newark in itself, there are a lot of younger clergy members, and we're blessed with them. God has really treated us well with leadership, and they're developing. And they're developing not just inside the church, but they're starting to really get a hold and understanding of the community. And I know for some there's still some learning, and that's why the interaction of organization structure is very important. I know we now have the Central Ward Clergy Alliance under Pastor Grover, I believe it is, and I think there's the South Ward Clergy Alliance under Pastor Rouse. I know that one of the new clergy leaders who just got a church ordained in the West Ward, Reverend Patrick Council, is organizing the alliance there. But out of all the organizations, the long-standing is the Newark, North Jersey Committee of Black Churchmen. And so hopefully we'll start to pull all that leadership together so we can start to bring all the ministry as it relates to leadership into the room to have the same conversation with civil rights organizations such as the NJNAACP, with organizations such as the Legislative Black Caucus, which I represent, and with the Black Issues Convention, which Jerome Harris represent, and the Conference of New Jersey Conference of Black Mayors and other such organizations the way it used to be. Because I think if we really do that, many of the problems that we are faced with today, we can really address those problems. The politics that's impacting us to create some of these problems, we can really address that. But I really think it takes a coalition like the old days, as I call it, of civil rights leaders coming together and bringing our people together and giving them really nutritious type of substantive word food and education. With that, that takes me into you, James. James Harris, President of the State Conference NAACP. Now I want our viewers to know that when they hear James Harris, they oftentimes get confused with James Harris, President of the State Conference of NAACP, with Jerome Harris, who is the Chairman and President of the New Jersey Black Issues Convention, which just celebrated their 29th anniversary from the day they started under the leadership of the Honorable former Councilman and State Legislator, Assemblyman Donald Tucker. So it's good to have you here, Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Rice, for having me.
And I want to, take the opportunity to say that, when we were in school together, grammar school and high school, I just want to say you did very well looking at my papers, No, but seriously, James, why don't you tell our viewers something about you and your family life and your growth and how you really got involved with NAACP and the importance of that?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, giving honor and praise to the Almighty. I've been very blessed. I am one of 9 children born to North Carolina sharecroppers. And for those who may not know what sharecropping is, it's the legalized slavery where folks were free to go, but they stayed on the plantation and basically lived for the slave owner or the person who owned the land, with the understanding that we would give half of everything that we've harvested back to him, and then we would pay for the cost of harvesting out of our half. Well, my folks got tired of that during the Great Migration and moved to New Jersey. First, we stayed 1 month in Perth Amboy in a cold water flat, and then found that that was not working for 7 children, 2 parents. So we moved to the only place that would have 7 kids and 2 parents, and that's on Belmont Avenue, now Irving Terminal Boulevard in Newark. Graduated from Southside High School, number 2 out of 365 students, and was fortunate enough to go to Montclair State. And I was very blessed while I was at Southside to get hooked up with some incredible athletes as well as scholars, Lee Hagan, Ron Rice, Marion Bolden, Kathleen Witcher, many of the people who have led this state, and I dare say the nation. And then I had the opportunity of going to Montclair State, where I got 2 degrees and got very active in athletics there, so I'm inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then I worked there for a long time, and then I spent about 26 years in the New Jersey Army National Guard and retired as a major, and was very pleased to have a command at the Newark Armory in Newark, where I really got to see the whole scope of what happens with transition from military to civilian, and then back to civilian life. The NAACP, to me, was a nice fit because I saw what happened in the rural South, seeing segregated fountains and segregated toilets, and then being integrated, so to speak, in the North. But I was just always intrigued that while people in the South were fighting segregation, I moved to the segregated North. By the time I graduated from Southside High School, I think we were 98% African American, maybe 2% Latino, and we made those 2 or 3 white guys honorary members of Soul Brothers. But it was from the segregated South to the segregated North. And so I just got involved, and from there I've held positions as committee chair of the local in Montclair. I was there for about 20 years as the president, and then I was selected to be the education chair for the state. Served about 6 years as first vice president, and in 2005 ran and was very successful to become the president of the state NAACP. So now we have 41 branches, a prison branch, 9 college chapters, 15 youth councils, and a very well-established AXO program, which is the Intellectual Scientific Olympics, that is headed by the incredible Deborah Smith Gregory, who's a Newark school educator. So I'm just blessed, and I see that I'm very, very pleased that we've established a very good working relationship with the ministers throughout the state, with the New Jersey Black Issues, and I'm particularly proud of the association that we have with the Legislative Black Caucus, because I think the combination makes sense because we all are trying to represent the same interests and improve the quality of life for all of our people throughout the state of New Jersey.
You know, and we really enjoy the relationship with you and NAACP statewide, as well as with the clergy organization statewide. And as you know, the Legislative Black Caucus has actually, set out to really organize clergy members in terms of a partnership so that we can support each other and share information throughout the state and be supportive of the kinds of things that particularly African Americans need to be addressed throughout the state and government as well as in the community. And we have our clergy partnership, and I think you attended some of the meetings where clergy members range all the way from, I believe, Salem, Gloucester County up to Bergen County. And that was under the leadership of Honorable Elise Evans, Assemblywoman, who was also first vice chair of the New Jersey Black Issues Convention.
And a former president of the NAACP in Patterson.
That's right, and we're going to be losing her soon. But she did a terrific job, and I just hope that Pastor, Bishop, and James, that the two of you help us to continue to strengthen that statewide organization of clergy, because I think it's important, and we're going to talk more about that on future programs. But the NAACP, to many of us in the black community, for years in New Jersey, has really lost its mission. And I think that because of that, you weren't able to enhance the membership, because as a black elected official, as well as a citizen, I've often got, complaints that, well, they're not about civil rights anymore. But we do know that under your leadership, when you first came in, it made a world of difference. And I've watched NAACP membership grow statewide, but I watched the chapters grow. In fact, I was talking to a young man who told me he's the president of the NAACP, I believe, up in Warren County.
Yes.
Now, Warren County has nothing but deers and woods, and but that's a wonderful thing, and that all happened under your leadership, I understand.
Yes. I think the NAACP has not lost its mission. What has changed is the society has changed quite a bit. And let me be very clear. The mission of the NAACP is to eliminate racial discrimination and racial hatred. And furthermore, we are committed to equality of education, social, political, and economic equality. And for people who think that we're not relevant anymore, ask, are we equal in terms of educational opportunity? Do we share equally in economic opportunities? Are we socially equal to the rest of society? And most certainly, when it comes to political, we still have a lot of people who, although the NAACP fought for the right to vote, people stay home on election day. And we will never be happy as long as anybody thinks that it's okay to stay home on election day, given the blood, sweat, and tears that we've gone through just to have the right to vote. And it's particularly disturbing when we see what happened in 2008, when we all prayed, celebrated, registered, and got people to the poll in record numbers. And then 2 years later in the state of New Jersey, we stayed home, and look what we have now. Civil rights is under attack. Urban folks are under attack. African Americans are not mentioned at all in this administration. The only African American judge that we had has been not renewed. And now we see that the attack on just about every institution that African Americans head. The University of Medicine and Dentistry is not an accident. Look at where it is, look at the leadership. 2 years ago, in the first budget, it was Thomas Edison that was to be merged.
Right.
So those institutions that are headed by African Americans seem to be particularly targeted by some people, including the Tea Party and the conservatives. And I think that we have people in our own community who have gotten confused. We are not in a post-racial society. If anything, we'd better sharpen our game and realize that racism is coming closer and taking away some of the things that we thought we were secure about.
We're going to talk more about that in a moment because I want Bishop James to weigh in on this as well. But before we do that, I want to go back to Bishop James because, Bishop, there are a lot of issues that you and President James Harris, like myself and others in the leadership role, have been very much concerned about that impacts the community at large, but particularly the urban communities where the majority of the population happen to be women and minorities, African Americans and other ethnic groups. Those with low income, wage earners, middle class in many cases, and some simply with no income at all. So we hear about the shelters and people being violated, we hear about the street stuff. But the gangs and the drugs and the guns have gotten out of hand. And in my heart, and from my experience, I just really believe that we can do a more effective job of addressing that problem in government, working with community leaders, but we don't do it. And so, Bishop, I have a question for you because I recall reading not that long ago that you were a victim of a carjacking yourself. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us about that experience and what happened and where is that at the end of the day?
Well, opening the gate at the church, coming down on a Wednesday evening for Bible study.
And that's Paradise Baptist Church.
That's Paradise
where you
Baptist
minister,
Church, where I minister. Right. And as you notice, Senator, you've been there several times. There's no graffiti. I usually have the respect of the neighborhood, and went to open the gate as I always do, and I felt pressure in my back, and really a young man had drop kicked me from behind, and so of course I hit the floor. Got up from the parking lot, and a young man was ducking down in the truck, and another one sitting, because my pickup truck, another one sitting in the driver's seat. And I said to him, I said, "You must don't know who I am." And he just looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said, "Get out of my truck. Just get out." And he just looked at me, threw it in gear, took off. I did call the police, and because I do chaplaincy with both the Newark Police Department and the New Jersey State Police, quick response. We just did our income tax. The refund check was in the truck. I had picked up. I'm a